Hi, welcome to Unearthed with Asia and Jennica Haywood. Today we're in partnership with SCSA Radio Network. Unearthed is a raw and an honest conversation between two survivors that have spent years in different healing modalities and working really bravely with our two unique perspectives as we've come into the spaces that we are and the journey that we've been taking. We're a mother-daughter duo. And from this really cool perspective, we can bravely bring in depth and authenticity into personal conversations with each other. And we're hoping that really what we're doing is giving you the courage and you the permission and you the validation that you might be thinking you need or that you could share with others about what our conversations are offering. So our subject today, Jennica is going to talk to us about something. She's going to introduce it, and I'll just kind of turn it over to her.
Hello. So excited to be here today. We're going to be talking about healing and self-trust, and just diving into as you're discovering your past, as you're discovering and walking your path of self-healing, just different ways that we can get stuck in cycling and giving our power away. It's a very nuanced subject. It's something that everyone who is walking this path knows, knows very well. And as we seek out help and utilize the value of community, we just really enjoy discussing ways that we can embody trust, put trust within ourselves, and guide ourselves through our own healing without giving our power away to others who don't necessarily have our best interest in mind, and just learning when to walk away, learning when to change patterns, and continue to embolden yourself and empower yourself as we walk through many lessons that this path holds for us.
I love that. I like how you're saying walk through. There's many times as I've been on my healing journey, I felt like I was like gracefully stumbling, maybe even not even gracefully. I think I was stumbling through it. I like to refer to parts of my healing journey that, there were so many times I felt like I was like hacking my way through a jungle with a pocket knife, like not really even knowing where the path was, trying to go instinctively, seeing what was in front of me, not really understanding what was in front of me. Sometimes I did, but I didn't feel like I was well equipped. But the point is, even in that space of not feeling like totally sure or totally aware, I kept going. And the thing that feels so important to me about this is being a survivor, or I want to say a victim as well, because we resonate with victimhood a lot of times, whether we recognize it or not. And I think that's going to come out into this conversation. And it's not a negative thing. It's just a different emotional stance that we as survivors hold a lot of times in different ways. It's not like we embody or victimhood, and sometimes we do, but going through this as a survivor, the idea of self-trust can be really distant. I know for me, it took a long time, years, I will say, to recognize that I didn't have self-trust, because I was turning my power over to other people, and I didn't even see it as such. I was just thinking that I was agreeing with what was going on, like, yeah, that sounds good to me, or just submitting into somebody else's decisions or will or power or rules because of it's coming under the guise of obedience and being like, I'm going to be a better person because of it. So when you said nuance, like, I really want people to be okay with the fact that we're going to identify some things, but the nuance, like, it's just scattered. There are pieces and shards and puzzle pieces, like however you want to create it in your mind. There's so much that you get to work with on this. And some of those pieces, like those puzzle pieces, are already put together. So maybe some of the things we say, you're like, oh yeah, I got that. And other pieces, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know I had this whole other section I needed to put together for myself. Right. So I feel really, I love that, that this is where we're going today with this conversation.
Yeah, ultimately, each of us have our own experience. Each of us has a very unique perspective, a very unique experience of what has gone on. And so then you're going to have your own unique nuances and ways that it has, ways that you have interpreted things, and ways it's landed in your system, ways your body
Mhm.
has carried it, ways your
Yeah.
mind has carried it. It's intriguing to me because of the unique perspective that both you and I hold, coming from a religious background where it's been normalized and, in fact, pertinent that you give your power away in order for the acceptance of something greater than you, and or listening to someone who knows better than you,
Mhm.
especially with that baseline of fear. It
Mhm.
really, really intertwines very well with victimhood and coming out of being a victim, and again, reclaiming your power, emboldening yourself, pulling that trust into your being back.
Mhm.
This conversation can relate to survivors as well as people that are trying to find their way outside of religious institutions.
Absolutely.
Just because of that dynamic in general of giving your power away.
Yeah, belief breakdowns are really tricky because they have different titles. So I know a number of people that are going through what is called a faith crisis. And in all honesty, there's crises throughout your life that you, as you're progressing, kind of looking at it as a spiral, as you hit this thing again, but you're actually up a level, you might not even recognize it as such. But these experiences of being in a crisis is exactly what you were just saying. We're coming from these different places. And I know for me, when I was going through my own crisis, as I was going through this, my healing process, pulling up memories, discovering things, having dots connected with waking experiences and current time experiences. And wow, I mean, navigating what I was navigating, I recognized that everything that I was unraveling was actually unraveling me also, not just inside, but I just felt like my whole belief system had completely failed, and it was demolished in a lot of ways. And so the orientation of what I was experiencing, who I could trust, what was going on outside of me, what was going on inside of me, it was messy. It was like a massive earthquake or a bomb went off, and or a volcano exploded, when all of the dust and the debris and everything is still falling. It's pretty cloudy, like you can't see, and it's terrifying and messy, and you don't know what the fallout looks like yet. And so walking through these different experiences of crisis, it's going to affect even your belief system. And your belief system a lot of times is actually really entwined with your identity. And in the religion that I grew up in, like with the Mormon and LDS religion that I was so ingrained in, my belief system was me in so many ways. Like they were the same thing. And so part of me I was recognizing was actually dissolving or dying, or that. So there's a mourning that was going on with it too. Having all of that going on and then being able to step into, yeah, I'm going to trust myself, seemed like a pretty big gap, you
It
know?
definitely brings up within the crises, or I like to call it the quantum crumble.
Ooh, that's even better. I love that.
It's when your awareness has been blasted open enough to have a crisis of either faith or, realizing that there is abuse that has happened to you in your
Mhm.
past. That expansion of awareness is a massive quantum up level, which every time is followed by a quantum crumble.
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it and it just it you can't help but look around and scream the question, well, then who do I trust? What do I believe? What is God? I don't know what's
Mhm.
left and right at this point, what's up and down, who I am, who you are. It's a quantum crumble that begs so many deep questions that do not have a quick turnaround, a
Right.
magic pill that will give you all of those answers. And ultimately, in my experience and the experience of many others, including yourself, you come back around at some point to realize the only thing you can trust is yourself. The only compass you can follow is within. The only way you can find your way through that jungle, even if it's just with a pocket knife, is based upon your own inner knowing and that expansion of awareness and realizing. I love that you brought up the spiral. Realizing it's not a straight path. It's not a direct one. It's not going to match anybody else's. And we spiral upwards. And so we end up revisiting many of these cycles from different perspectives and different vantage points. And this is where I find it extremely important, because we end up with a choice in each of these up-leveling spirals, in each of these quantum crumbles or quantum expansions, of whether we're going to look back on where we were or look at the cycle we're in currently and pack ourselves full of trust and love and realize this is growth, no matter how messy or how backwards it might feel or how lost you may seem. Or we can look at that and go, well, I must not know. And I, do this self-hate, dissolving and then decide well, because I don't have a clear line of shot to my goal, someone else must. And there's a choice point all the time when you're walking this path.
I would say absolutely. And that's sometimes that's not even recognizable. And other times it can even be paralyzing. And I would like to, that place where you get paralyzed, like, oh my gosh, and you're kind of feeling very unprepared for that instantaneous quantum crumble that just, I love that word, that just comes out there. There's a real place for space and just kind of allowing that to wreck you, allowing that to just kind of vibrate itself or just roll through you, or whatever your experience is, the way you want to refer to it. Because we have this tendency to, when everything is falling apart in front of us, like rush, grapple, run, whatever, like instantly look around for something else to restabilize, because it's very destabilizing to like find that balance again. And so instead of actually kind of the pendulum's over here, and instead of kind of like just sitting with the pause so it can kind of come back really naturally to this middle ground, we just like freak out and just allow it to come over here. So now you're swinging back over into, who can I blame? What's going on? I can't do this. Whatever the thought process is, sometimes that's when we're tempted to fall back into what we just came out of. And the funny thing is once you have those experiences too, you can't unsee what you just saw. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't put that balloon back in the box. You can't refit there as much as you want to. And it's not necessarily something you recognize cognitively right away, but internally you already know that. And that's probably one of the reasons why you're just like, I don't want to know this, but yet you do. Because what we're doing is we're allowing what no longer serves us, what no longer is keeping us anchored on that spiral, we're allowing that to drop away so we can actually move on up and move that energy that is already helping us move forward, go forward, instead of like, we want to drop anchor and just say, I can't do this. And it's like, well, you know what, tide's moving you anyway. It's happening, like, so moving with this and feeling that pause and that silence and feeling so uncomfortable in that space is not a natural practice for us. And I don't know, like,
it's painful. It's scary. You discover and drop into emotions that physiologically activates the fight or flight response. So it's completely normal to try to run or freeze or panic and get away from the uncomfortability, the pain, the sorrow, the anger, these emotions, because not only is this happening mentally, where your awareness is becoming bigger, but your physical body is being shooken on a physical level, and you've got hormone responses happening in your brain. And so I love that you say space, because space is where healing occurs. Taking that deep breath and realizing there's nothing to get away from, there's only something to allow to move through you. And
Mhm,
that none of this is, I mean, of course, assuming that you are in a safe place,
mhm.
you're safe. You're safe to experience the fear. You're safe to experience the anger, the sorrow, the I don't want to know this. I don't want to
Yes.
know this. I don't want to see this. In fact, right now, my physical body needs to let this come through it before I can even mentally,
Mhm.
continue to go with the wave. And I have found so much importance in physically coming back to the breath and taking that deep breath and realizing, yes, the
Mhm.
wave is pushing, things are happening. But in this moment right now, all you need to do is breathe and ask your body and yourself what you need and how
Mhm.
you can move through this in the best way possible, as opposed to running from one side to the other, trying to find something or someone to take it away so that you never have to deal with it again, because
Right.
that's just not the reality of life.
One of the things that really helped me, like it was, I want to say it was one of those, it wasn't a quantum crumble, it was actually a quantum leap. Like I actually was so empowered by knowing this. I had had something terrible happen. Like I was, this is going to like affect you because this is when our dog, Che, was
Mhm.
actually hit by a car and I witnessed it. And it was not a good experience. Not it it wasn't a good experience, but he was he was he was a really awesome companion and so dear to my heart, that kind of thing. And I can look back on that now because it was so sudden and so many emotions were going on and things that I had to take care of in that moment were required and that kind of thing. So I had this really massive traumatic experience and it was extended. Like it wasn't just like there and done, kind of like a car accident. If you're in a car accident, the impact happens, but you don't just kind of go, wow, and shake that off and drive away. There's something that's going on afterwards. And the something that's happening on the outside can be completely different than the something that's going on the inside. So you talked about the hormones that get released, right? You've got
Mhm.
different hormones that are suddenly flooding your system. You've got reactions that are suddenly, like instantly there in your system. And I remember the aftermath, like a couple of days after, I was still not just mourning, but I was still like not in my head, disoriented. Like it was so unnerving to me. And I kept thinking, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Like what, like I know what mourning is, but this feels different. And I actually got a phone call from a friend who, um, was just checking in on me saying hi. And he actually um, does trainings for police officers for law enforcement on trauma brain. And here I am in trauma brain and not really knowing it. And I told him what happened. And it was so amazing where he said, you know, what's going on is you're in shock. First of all, he goes, and these are the hormones that's going through you. And you're going to need to expect your body going through this. You're going to be in this kind of state of mind for about 3 days. This is how you're going to be for about 10 days because this is what it normally takes a human organism to move those chemicals that, those hormones, those things through your body. It was the most empowering thing I'd ever heard in that moment because I didn't think I was crazy. I finally was like, oh, this is a natural response. Now, in that brain, I still wasn't thinking that I was in a natural response. Like, I'm like, yeah, this is it, but I never like identified I must be in shock or I've got these hormones that are going to be in my body for the next 10 days because this is the way this is running, like it gave me this expansive spot to sit in a pause and go, wow, this is a natural reaction for my body right now with something that's so big. So when you look at childhood sex abuse, when you look at childhood sexual violations, you need, like for those of us that have this um, survivorship is what I wanted to call it in this moment, who are survivors, those experiences really had a chemical aftermath that was going on as well that that were present, and we didn't know how to work with it necessarily. And there's a possibility that we kind of came into a place where that almost felt normal. I mean, I don't know what anybody else's experience was with it, but there's not a lot of information that's being given to you other than whatever you're being told, don't tell, or threats, or shame, or, I mean, there's a big list, right? And that's also flowing through your brain as these chemicals are flowing through your body. Like, this is a jungle. And, hacking through that's crazy hard some days.
It's amazing because, I mean, it's the same responses happen, whether it's just post-traumatic experience in the moment or 10, 15 years later, when it's coming back through your body. Your body is going to respond as if it has happened just barely as well. So it's incredible, the memory that our body has, but how the responses follow us as well. Again, I'm gonna ping the Body Keeps the Score book, because
absolutely,
they go into how that's one of the main aspects of PTSD, and the development and experience of that is the responses in the body and in the brain are the same. Whether or not you just experienced it, or whether you are now remembering it and needing to process it because it's been affecting your life, and now you have pegged the root of what it was way back when you were 4 years old, or 25 years ago when you were, in a war zone, whatever the PTSD, having a dog, being present, watching this beautiful animal that's so dear to your heart die. I mean, whatever it is, your body it takes on an imprint emotionally, mentally, physically, and that will replay itself no matter the time frame. So giving yourself that allowance, that space, that the awareness that this is a normal response. There is a trauma that happened, just barely happened in the past, but is still present within your body, and your body's normal response is to try to run from it, try to get away from it, try to stop it from happening, because it's painful, it's terrifying, it's terrible, it's eliciting the fight or flight responses. And this is where I find that healing happens in the spaces between, when your body can reconnect with you, speak with you, and listen to the fact that it is in a safe place now, and that this response is okay, and we're going to move through it, but there's nothing to get away from. This is something that is absolutely okay to move through, and we can bring it back down to the parasympathetic nervous system response, calm the nervous system, allow those hormones to flood and release, and then you can continue on in walking this path. It's I find that this is where we tend to launch into one side of the spectrum or the other, and fall into that savior complex of trying to run, avoid, ignore, disassociate from, and give the power away to someone else in hopes that they will take it away from you and fix it. And whether that's on the one side of, I'm a victim, I'm wounded, I'm hurt, I'm not fixed, I'm broken, someone needs to fix me, or the whole other side of, I don't want to look at this, just give me the magic pill, I don't want to even see it, I don't want to have a partnership with my body on the experiences that I have sustained and been through, I just want someone to take it away from me. Both of which are savior complexes, and both of which are massive giving away of your power.
Yeah, the surrendering of power.
That's surrendering your power, and prevents that trust from embedding and creating a foundation within you, and continues to put it outside of yourself, which is, again, from the beginning, what religion or what organizations that are trying to take your power away consistently support, is you putting your trust in something outside of yourself.
It's completely enforced in other ways too. So this is where the nuances come in, right?
Absolutely.
This is where what you feel that is right and good and beautiful really is there, and it gets coupled with this other give away your power, submit, obey. Like it gets really messy because it is so entwined, and it makes sense. Like there's a place of that makes sense, so that when you start into some of these body releases where you have memories come forward, or including body memories and other things that are there, emotional memories, as you're releasing these little pockets of crystallized experiences, they're going to challenge what you've already knit together. Like it's going to start tugging at those fibers, right? And that's scary, because this is what's holding you together, at least in your mind, right? And to have that threatened, even from within, really also reinforces the idea that you want to push it away, like you don't want that to be there. And it also enforces the idea that, well, I need to go outside of myself to find the next thing. Apparently, the current thing I'm using, this modality, this meditation, this whatever, isn't working, so I need to find the next one. And then you find something else that feels good. And I'm not dissing this progress or this process, but it's really good to get into a self-check, because if every time you have these reactions, you are jumping outside of yourself to find the next thing, the next whatever, it actually spins into an addiction. It's kind of the addiction of the healing, or the addiction of the solving of the problem, or like it. And it's kind of nuanced too, right? Like, is it an addiction or is it a motivation? What are you being drawn towards? But in that process, are you giving your power away? Are you unconsciously submitting? And that's why I feel like this conversation is so powerful, because the self-check is what comes in. Like, none of this is a problem if you're in a self-checking place where it's like, well, how do I feel about that? Am I feeling like I really got to call that person every single time I have a crisis? It's like, oh my gosh, this is what happened, and let's process it, versus really saying, it could be good to call that person, but maybe I can sit with this on my own first. Or the reverse of that could be, I don't want to call anybody. I'm just going to kind of go back in my shell, because that's my habit. That's where my comfort zone is. And that would be your habit of just pushing everything away. So you can be on both sides of that spectrum too.
Yeah, it's a wonderful checking in point for me is whether or not I'm trying to avoid, or whether I'm pushing into what is the most uncomfortable. Am I on my edge? Am I running from the edge?
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, because anytime that there is, a seeker looking for someone to, surrender their power, whether that's someone or an organization or whatever, fear tactics are always kind of at the core of it. And so when those threads that you were talking about are kind of getting pulled at, it immediately squares you up with your fears, with what you're trying to run from. You can't kind of have it in the side view mirror. You can't have it in your peripherals. You are squared up with that which you are trying to get away from, that your body's telling you to get away from what your mind is telling you to get away from. And I find that checking in with, am I running from that? Am I trying to put that in the trunk? Am I trying to get away from that? And here's the solution, whether that's calling a friend, or jumping to another modality, or finding a new healer, or getting into another religion, whatever it may be. Are you trying to run from this, or are you taking this square on and going, I need support with this, or I need to sit with this, or whatever it may be? Because again, like you said, it is so nuanced and so particular with what phase of healing you're in, what types of healing you're doing, where you're at in your process and your trust level with yourself. Community is fundamental in getting through this. I mean, I've leaned on you, you've leaned on me. We've each had our own systems of support, and it's all a trial and error thing. It's all learning you again. It's all pulling your power back from all these places it's just been scattered in because of this traumatic experience that you're now trying to work your way through while simultaneously working with life and working with physiological, responses, and working with the beliefs and the ideas that you have had constructed for so long that are now getting threads pulled out of it. Or you're in the quantum crumble and you're like, just someone catch me. None of it's bad. It's just a matter of, are you leaning in? Are you leaning into your fears? Are you welcoming these demons to show themselves? Are you allowing your body to breathe through this? Or are you tightening up, giving away, and running or avoiding? And that's always my key, because there's a million different experiences and ways that we all walk ourselves through our healing. But ultimately, that inner compass is the only thing that is going to tell us where we're at, if we're running or not, and lead us through and to exactly what we need to free ourselves from these experiences, from these, the tethering and the traumatic, I'll just call it PTSD, that affects our day-to-day life, whether the trauma happened a year ago or 18 or 22 or 50, it doesn't really matter.
It's, as you're talking about this, I feel like I keep getting a visual in my mind about how, when those traumatic experiences happen, it's an insulation around that compass. And so if we can orient ourselves towards the idea that as those fibers that have been added to, like as we've been weaving this big protection blanket around ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now as we're actually in what a healing space, a releasing and an empowering, checking in, different like phase of whatever. So as you're doing that and you're tugging on those fibers, that some are ready to be unwound and some are like super, super tight still. It is a process, and just trusting that, excuse me, trusting that what you're doing is really on point, even if it is messy, is really, really powerful. So if you can orient yourself around the idea of, I have created this really tight woven blanket with every traumatic experience. And now I'm allowing myself to get closer and closer to that inner compass and kind of get clean with that and pure with that, and really allow that to navigate you through your world authentically. That's an amazing, that's my goal. That's what I'm after. That's what I've been working on. And that insulation has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller because I haven't, I've been working on it, right? And teasing more out and going for more, and like, oh, there's still another thread there. Okay, well, let's see where this is. And it becomes less of a threat once you get in the practice of this, but you've got to come inside. You're looking at it from your point of view, right? And the closer and closer you get that compass in line of yourself, the more that self-trust starts coming up more and showing itself a little bit more. And you're just like, wow, okay, we're going to keep trying this. And that, pocket knife gets a little bigger and you have a little bit more of a machete or whatever, you know what I mean? You're still kind of wandering through this, but it becomes actually more like what I like to call is like this idea of being your own personal archaeologist. Like there are times as that archaeologist, as you're digging through and working with these traumas on your own, you think about an archaeological site. I mean, to break the ground typically requires some pretty big equipment. So you're going to be bringing in like a backhoe or, something really large to break that ground. And that's a lot of times when those experiences happen where you just feel like completely shattered because the surface thing or that insulation is so thick, and you have these moments where something just jars you and you're just like totally triggered. That's a breaking ground thing. And then as you break that ground and like get in that stillness and then observe, it's like, so what's needed next? Do we need to break even further? Are we going to jump out and grab a shovel? That kind of thing. It gets a little closer and closer to where you're actually finding that you'll some of this requires you getting on your hands and knees and getting a toothbrush and a toothpick out so that you can get those little crevices. That's the way the beauty of so many things have been unearthed. And it's astounding how carefully constructed things have to do. But the amount of equipment or, self choosing into what your healing looks like can be. Sometimes you really do need the big stuff, and other times it's kind of mid-range, and then other times it's just like delicate. Be very kind, sit with this, look, observe, that kind of thing.
I will say, being 15, 16 years into this and having a quantum crumble in January,
oh,
it's
I just had one like a couple days ago.
Yeah, there's not really a linear, not that you're pointing at this necessarily, but you could have broken ground a minute ago and still have just come out of a quantum crumble. And I would caution to have that mean anything other than still look how far you've come, and how incredible is it that when there's the big equipment coming out, or when you're getting a fine-tooth comb. I love that you brought up the picture of this woven blanket around this compass of your heart, though, because to me that's just, it's so soft and padded and protective and almost cozy, like that which is the most important to you, being your heart, is what we've protected through these experiences. And so, I mean, a lot of the times as I've gone through my healing, it's been described as walls, heart walls, or these barriers, or these structures that are just so aggressive. And so, I mean, at the time I didn't really care what the description was. I knew there was something blocking my heart, but even that sounds so aggressive. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I've been protecting my heart in a beautiful soft blanket that has gotten so massive that no one can penetrate it, but it's still so that, my heart is kind of nice and cushioned so that no one else can hurt it. But we can't guide ourselves through life. We can't connect with our true essence. We can't build our relationship back with God if it's muted and buried. No matter how soft and tender and lovingly we did it, we have to pull the threads. We have to become vulnerable. We have to be able to pull our hearts out of these encasements of whatever sort, and allow ourselves to feel again and see that direction, and mess up and do and be imperfect, but also love with everything we have, and feel heartbreak with everything we have, and go through those times where there's no way to run from the pain that life gives us, but to continually keep our hearts blocked up allows for repetitive cycles of suffering and revisitation of all of these ways we've been victimized and hurt and broken and taken down, instead of opening back up and realizing that's where our power lies. If we keep that barricaded, we don't move past this. We don't alchemize the shame, the blame, the these terrible experiences into something that is just worth the value of so much gold. We don't get to the gold of what life is offering us through these experiences without pulling at every single one of these threads, without getting our little fine-tooth combs out, without taking the jackhammer to the whole foundation and structure of belief that is covering, that has encased all of this, which requires more pain to go through. But oh my gosh, when you start finding those layers of yourself of wow, I didn't know this was me. I didn't know that I had this level of intimacy or this level of vulnerability. I didn't know that I could connect in this way. I didn't know that even, I used to think that crying was such a weakness and I should never show it because someone is absolutely going to take advantage of me if I show any sort of weakness. And now it's my greatest superpower. It's what's allowed my body to be free of eating disorders, is allowing it to cry. Miracles happen when we allow ourselves to allow life to flow through us instead of trying to protect ourselves from it.
Well, you mentioned the word muted, and I really feel like that's a key right there, because you can still, it's like you can still ping from your heart, but it's muted. You can still reach out beyond your, as that compass, or your heart being that compass, but muted is, that's clearly a frequency that is just muffled, and it's I want to be, clear, and I want to have that frequency, like, not muted, not muffled. And I truly believe that as humans, we are on this planet, with all the other organisms and everything else that's here, where animals and plants and water and all of this other things, the humans have this really cool ability to feel and to self-reflect and be self-aware. And I feel like we're built to feel, we're built to emote, we're built to have these feelings. And when we have feelings, it is counterintuitive and counter our even essence to bury them and hold them and anchor them and crystallize them, right? So we're actually in a lot of ways going against how we were designed when we don't have feeling. That is also, that builds that insulation around your compass, your heart, your knowing. And naturally it's going to happen. Like, I'm going to go back to the body keeps the score too. Like, the way we're designed also, with all of the hormonal responses when shock comes in and everything, that's part of it. But that's where we have been in the habit of just allowing it to be. We haven't necessarily been taught or trained that now that we're kind of past the shock and it's a few weeks later or even a few years later, it's absolutely okay to go back and allow those emotions to come up. In fact, it's essential that you do. And this is where a lot of the debate of, well, repressed memories, or children aren't reliable, or, those memories aren't reliable, or those feelings, where are they coming from? Let's try and identify it. Like, there's this debate over that because people aren't necessarily in a space where that's just normal. It's like, wow, I had that, the dog got hit in front of me. I had all this trauma. I think I'm ready to go into that now. I think I'm ready to allow that to happen and find that pause, and then remember what's been imprinted. I mean, it's not a pretty thing. It's not something I want to remember again. Like, why? But at the same time, the why is the healing part of it. And it's not a one and done also, because we're so uncomfortable. We want to, like, okay, promise me this is going to be done. But the more we're in this practice of trusting what wants to come forward, when we're ready to go there consciously, or when it just decides to show up on its own, and really respecting that, and we move that emotion and we move that through us, that is what makes it so whatever had been anchored in here does get teased out, does kind of release, and that insulation gets less and less. And I feel like as we teach that, and as we encourage that, and as we change that, then this becomes the norm, and we can support each other. Like, I know you and I have a dialogue that we can say, wow, I have, this emotion came out. I had this, I don't know where it's coming from, experience. And I'm really, I think it's based in fear, but I'm not sure, because it feels like jealousy, or it feels like abandonment, like we have some words where we're not really anchoring into, I am this, and this is what it is, and I'm going to blame this for it. It's just like, this is curious. I'm going to pull on this thread. I'm going to figure out what it is. And an emotion may come out, and it could be anger, it could be rage, it could be like overwhelm. All of these things are connected to it. And as you let it, kind of like releases it, and you might need to release it 2 or 3 times. But the fact is, there's a support system that allows that to actually happen. And so it's become so regular with us, regular in my life, because of the way I've been practicing my healing, and with you, that the ability to trust yourself becomes less attached to the story and more attached to the excavation or the release of it.
My favorite part, I think, about having the support system that we've cultivated, even just between us and between our other aspects, is that there's always been a baseline of, if it's not resonating with you, take it or leave it. If something lands, great. If it doesn't, you are the wisdom keeper. You know the best for you at all times and always, no matter where you're at in your healing process, whether you feel like you've just broken ground and you're getting ready to unearth God knows what, because you have just discovered there's something to unearth, or whether you've unearthed an entire Egyptian city and are still going at it.
Right.
The cultivation of the trust within yourself and getting that compass to start responding to you, it's at every single phase. It's within the community that you rely on. It's within the relationships that you trust, where you can call them up in a rage or in a sobbing fit, and just utilizing that valuable support. But it has always had that baseline of coming back to me, getting the support. How does it fit with me? Does it fit? Did that help? Not really. I don't think that's quite it. Well, okay, let me ask a different question. Let me get a little more curious here. Well, what do you think about this? It's all within my own. I run it through my body. I run it through my systems. I never, well, as we learn, I don't like using, I guess,
Absolutes.
Permanent. Yeah, absolutes. It's never, there's never a hierarchical basis when anyone is going to trump my inner knowing. And that's taken, obviously, trial and error. That's what life is. There's not an ending to, great, now I know everything, therefore I don't need to utilize support, or I'm not going to take your words into consideration. That's kind of a fun egoic cycle trip that happens. But I know that when I run it through myself, and I can kind of dance between these different things, without swinging from these sides of, well, she said this or he said this, therefore it must be true, must be fact. I'm the one that's broken. Someone knows more than me. I mean, if I can just kind of keep it within this realm, that's what we've cultivated in general. And that's allowed me to respond in a way that has been supportive and indicative of creating the trust and the foundation of vulnerability within myself that allows more of the unearthing process to happen, instead of more barricading of safety, because, well, it doesn't resonate with me, and I know that on some level of my being, but I'm going to ignore myself and my inner wisdom and listen to someone who has a title, someone who has a certification, a license, whatever it may be. They must know more than me. Never. Like, again, here's an absolute. I'm just going to say, you know. Yeah. So I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from today's conversation is really allowing yourself to put enough trust in yourself at any phase of this process, at any area of your healing of your life, to run it through you and your systems every time before making a full decision to hire a coach, or get into this modality, or continue in with a religion. I mean, whatever it may be, if it's aligned with you, that is what's important. And then if a year down the road, 10 years down the road, you have a quantum crumble and you're looking back going, how did I ever trust this person? How did I ever continue on that? I've hurt so many people through it. It's not anything but a learning process. And that is a perfect time to, again, realize you trusted yourself. You did the best that you could with everything that you had, with the knowledge that you had, and the circumstances that you had, with the heart walls you had up, without knowing what was underneath the ground, what city was buried. You did the best that you absolutely could, and that was necessary for you unearthing more.
Absolutely.
Therefore, love is where you need to be putting that in, instead of pulling yourself down and thinking you should have listened to somebody else other than you.
I think for me, sometimes if I can, that has been difficult. It has been difficult to look at where I've been and look at the pain that I'd caused, look at the the fallibility of what I was, this imperfectness. And, looking back on it. So I'm in a different space. And because I'm not done unraveling, it's very easy for some of that, like what you were saying, some of that for you to take the stance of self-criticism instead of like,
That's what I'm looking
wow,
for,
that
self-criticism.
was amazing. Look where I am now. And even if it feels like it's only 2 steps further or 7 miles further, the point is the celebration of what was going on there is really necessary. And if I discovered for me, if all I could do is say, wow, I mean, honestly, that I can see that's hurt this person, or that I submitted to that person, or I gave my power away there, or whatever the whole thing was. I was in that spin with that practitioner again, and I really needed to have that modality or this medication or whatever the thing is, because I was still searching for the magic pill or the person that knew. There's nothing wrong with that. I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. And like, as you said, being in the place where you could actually say and see that you've made progress, that kindness to myself was that was also kind of I want to say a groundbreaking, kind of like, oh, I can have kindness right alongside of this. That's cool. And it's a sweetness, and that is another indicator that you've taken off more of those layers from around your heart. It's even giving yourself that self-love that has been so elusive because you haven't been able to feel it. And here's the other thing too. I think the scary part, but the truth of this is if your spectrum of emotion is right here, and you can bounce back and forth in that spectrum, but it's a fairly narrow one. This is a fairly insulated one. So the more you uncover, the more positive joy you can feel and the more pain. So your spectrum starts to grow. And again, it's a beautiful thing, but that spectrum becomes more of what I feel the human organism, the human body, the human mind. As a human, we get to, we are here to experience. And so even knowing that your spectrum is super narrow, know that it's going to equal itself out always. So it might feel super messy and super horrible as you're unearthing all of this, but as bad as it is as good as it is. And we get to experience this joy and this love and this contact with ourselves that we've not necessarily ever experienced before, and really kind of jump into the validness of it. I did want to kind of circle back around and talk about the two things that you and I were, as we were kind of, thinking about what we're going to talk about today, and what you identified earlier is just really seeing and checking in with yourself. What is the motivation behind where you're going and what you're doing? Are you running from something, or do you feel invited into it? And are you looking for the one and done? Are you looking for the magic pill? Is this, are you saying to yourself, I just want to figure this out and get it over with so I can get on with life? That comment is a real clear one and done right there in my world. It's just like, I just want to get this over with. Just want to get this over with. So then, yes, but take a breath and kind of come into the stillness and yeah, this is super uncomfortable. And I'm okay with the fact that it's uncomfortable, even though I hate it. And I don't know how long this is going to take. That can kind of take you back a little bit away from turning over your power to the next practitioner, to the next person, and then just kind of habitually cycling through the failures in your mind of what somebody else is trying to work with you on, right? And just kind of collecting modalities. You've got this many in your this many tools and this much in your bank account. Not that that's bad, but is that your habit of distraction so you don't have to go in here? Or are you looking for the one and done, where it's just I got to find the thing? And so once I feel like I found the thing that is actually working, then all of a sudden you anchor into it and say, this is the only thing. And then you're not necessarily, at one point, you may find that you've got to let go of that. And that gets really scary too, because you've anchored into it being the solution.
Yeah, I think distraction is just a really good thing to reflect on as you're moving through this, and as the messiness and the nuances keep showing different faces and different shadows and different levels of learning, and just the cycles that we do repeat because we're human, and this is the experience of life. It really is a matter of, are you trying to distract yourself from the experience of life? Are you trying to, distort it so that you can, short term, essentially mute the symptom, or medicate the symptom versus going through that pain, the short-term pain, for this long-term gain of really gaining yourself, for lack of a better word. Yeah.
I think you're really hitting it, and it's there's so many ways that we can mute those symptoms. It would take another hour, day, whatever, to talk about. This is where food addictions or exercise addictions, or whatever, the running
modality
addictions.
addictions.
Yeah, it's like, what's the next thing? How many sound baths can I possibly do? But now I got to go to a drum circle, and then I need to do ayahuasca. And like, not that any of that is bad, but if they become a distraction, I need to see my therapist. Well, yeah, maybe you do, and maybe you don't. Like, it's so hard. Like, we could go on and on and on. And so again, all of this is so cool. It's all there to support. And as we're walking through the unraveling, we start at this one place of, this feels good to me. And you follow that. And then as you unravel and you're courageous in doing that, this feels good to me, whether it is a one and done, or whether it is a, kind of an addictive behavior, eventually that doesn't serve you anymore, because you are moving up that spiral. And then you can look at it and go, I don't know about that. That, quantum crumble happens, bam, here it hits you. And so it is a process, and so then you let go of a little bit more of that. You're unraveling a little more of your heart, of what's insulating your heart. And it's like this stepping through and stepping to. And all of that is definitely evidence that you can trust yourself, and you should trust yourself. And once you recognize that a practitioner or a friend or a partner or a person or whatever it is, no longer resonates with you, that you're no longer feeling like this is serving me, but I'll just put up with it. That's something to look at. Where is that coming from?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that you're not broken. You're not broken. You're not wrong. You're not something that has to be fixed. You're just putting back the pieces of the partnership that you once had with yourself. You're putting back the trust and the love that may have been lost within traumatic experiences. You're pulling yourself back from fractured pieces to more of a wholeness, but that does not mean broken. That does not mean needing to be fixed. You're still all there, and you need to trust that you can find anything and everything that you need to bring back online your inner compass, your inner knowing, that vulnerable love that we all crave from ourselves, from within, not from without.
The more you do that, the more it gets strengthened. The more you're uncovering, the more evidence that it is there within you. And it's actually a delightful discovery, even if the way you get that discovery is going through a lot of garbage and muck that has been crystallized and anchored in you. Like, it is so worth this process. And I love that you said that, you're not broken. Just keep remembering you're not broken, because feeling that brokenness is also an exquisite pain, but looking for something outside of you to fix it can also support the fact that you have this belief that you are broken. This is a long-term thing. I mean, I think you and I were talking about this earlier, and it's like, this is a long game. You are so worth it. You are in this because you're in this for life, meaning not in a depressing way, but it's like for life,
for you.
Life. So life comes through you, and it becomes even more beautiful and more colorful and more expansive and more delightful, because life gets to kind of rise up through you. So that little bit of a play on words there, like it's really the truth here. That's how this is working. Any last thoughts, Jen? We're ready to wrap this up for
Just
this
trust
episode.
yourself. You have the wisdom innately within you. Trust it. And even when you mess up or when you feel like you have, that's part of it. Love yourself through it. Trust yourself through it.
I love that. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. Jenica and I are doing this series of Unearthed for a duration that I don't even know yet. We're really having a lot of fun with this discovery. But just know that Unearthed is a forum to help survivors recognize their own strengths and thrive through their own courageous acts. And our conversations and our discussions address deeper aspects of childhood sex abuse that continue into adulthood, the thought processes and feelings of isolation and disempowerment that are common there. And then also on the other side of that, how healing can actually open up and help free this heart that is within all of us that gets to guide us as we're going through our world and our life. Our hope is to inspire and encourage others as we dive into these discussions through sharing stories and sharing our individual journeys. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.